In this week's Seder of Mattos, when Moshe Rabbeinu has ironed out with the members of the tribes of Reuven, Gad, and Chasi, Sheva, Menashe, that they will enter the land of Israel, serving in the vanguard of those conquering the land and waiting not 7 years of conquest, but 14 years, 7 years of kibush, of conquest, and 7 years of chiluk, of division of the land. And then first they'll return to the western side of the Jordan River to claim their inheritance within the rank and file of Klal Yisrael as the portion of Greater Israel. And Moshe Rabbeinu explains to them that after they will do that, then v'hiyisem nekiyim me'adanoyim me'Yisrael, that indeed you will be effectively nekiyim, you will be pure, you will be beyond suspect, both in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. And this is basically the makar. This is the terribly important source for a rather annoying halacha at times that's known as marasayim, that states that we're not permitted to do anything that will lend others to believe that we have in fact perhaps sinned. And this has terrific ramifications. Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal has a tshuva discussing whether or not an individual is permitted to go into a building that has a non-kosher restaurant to simply use the bathroom. And the basic upshot, presumably, to be on that, if there is no other place around that a person could avail himself of a restroom, other than going into this place, this restaurant that's non-kosher, there's no other place around, and of course he has tsar, he has physical pain, and he has to relieve himself, then it will be permitted to do so. But otherwise, he wouldn't be permitted to do so. And of course, this is somewhat contextual, because if everyone knows, for example, that every Howard Johnson, that everyone makes use far more of the bathrooms or of the souvenir shop as a rest stop rather than to eat in the restaurant, then it would be permitted because no one would be choshed, no one would suspect that Jew, that religious individual, as having engaged in something that is simply unacceptable from the perspective of halacha. And Rav Soloveitchik, the Rav Zatzal, explained that indeed this notion of marasayim basically says to us that one's reputation does not belong to oneself. For after all, a person could simply say, you know what? I have a right to choose to live my own life. And I will act accordingly, appropriately. And if a person wishes to suspect me of something that I haven't even done, well, that person is in the wrong, and let the chips fly. Says the Gemara in Brachos, a person is not permitted to pass the entrance of a shul without going inside during the time that they are davening b'tzibur. He's not permitted not to go inside. Why? Because others will think that he hasn't davened this yet, and he's frowning upon. Rashi uses a lashon of what? That he's being mavriach atzmo. He is actually fleeing, as it were. He doesn't care. He doesn't give a whit about the fact that people are davening b'tzibur in that shul, even though he may have davened earlier time. And the halacha states clearly that if there's another entrance and people will realize that he passed this entrance, but he may be going to enter the shul through a different entrance, or maybe he's not going into this shul, but if there's another shul in town, then he's going to daven b'tzibur in another shul, then he's permitted to do so, but otherwise he's not. Why? V'yisem nikiyim, you have to be thoroughly clean in the eyes of both HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael in terms of maris ayin. And at times in life, it certainly is a difficult thing to understand and a difficult thing to live up to. But I remember as a young child davening in the shul with my parents that inscribed upon the Aron Kodesh above the parochas were the words, Da lifnei mi ata omeid. Know before whom you stand. And Pashtus is based upon the Gemara Brachos that discusses the fact that when we engage in tefillah and davening, we're supposed to picture ourselves standing in front of the Borei Olam. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing in front of you, well, then you daven differently than if you're standing anywhere else. But I can't help but think that this is a lesson in life, not simply for the hour of our davening for Shas Tefillah, but for life in general. And at times in life, when we have to make decisions, sometimes hard and fast decisions, and we don't know which way to act, if we simply say to ourselves, Da lifnei mi ata omeid, I may not be davening now, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu is right in front of me, looking at the decision that I'm about to make. And if we look in the mirror, and even though we see ourselves, we also see HaKadosh Baruch Hu always standing in front of us, let alone behind us, then perhaps, maybe we will see ourselves differently in the mirror as well. And maybe we will care about our own reputation as much as others do, let alone as much as a Kadosh Baruch Hu does. And we will act in a way that's more befitting whom we are and whom we're supposed to be. Have a wonderful Shabbos.